to my show, and
Okay, we're good to go.
there we go. Thank you very much. So the definition, I need to get rid of this screen too. The definition of invasive species, they can be plants, animals, other living organisms like microbes and things you might not think about being invasive species. There's an executive order 1311, 11.2 or 13.112. An invasive species is a species that is non-native or alien to the ecosystem under consideration, and the introduction of the species causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. And then this is a really big number. There are about 50,000 introduced non-native plant and animal species in the US. About half of those 50,000 are plants. They cause about, that's a lot, yeah. They cause about $34 billion a year in damages to the environment, forestry, agriculture, industry, recreation, and human health. And I gave some sites there, which will be on the website for some sources and more information about the species. The characteristics of the invasive or the non-native plants, rapid growth, high reproductive rates. There are lack of natural controls to naturally take care of the problem, the overgrowth, an ability to tolerate a wide range of environmental conditions. And that's what has helped some natives outcompete and displace native species. They reduce biological diversity. They change the food web. Everything is related. They displace wildlife. And at least 42% of the federally endangered and threatened species in the US are at risk because of invasive species. So we've talked before with my birding and things about habitat and habitat loss. And when you think of how these things spread and take over our native forests, meadows, our prairies, what is happening to the habitat here and what it affects. So the introduction of many non-native plant species came for good reasons. Some had medicinal qualities. Some were valued for horticulture. They were pretty plants, for forage for animals, saying, hey, they ate this in the old country, bring our animals over and we'll feed them this. And, or it's, cheap, it grows fast for forage. Some were brought in for erosion control. When we were trying to help, we didn't know better. Some species arrived by accident, stowed away in cargoes and ballast of the ships. And at that time, and many years ago, 2 centuries ago and more, the potential for the invasiveness was not known and not even thought about, like bringing these things from Europe. The pioneers wanted to come and bring what they are familiar with. This is medicinal. This is what I cook with. These are the herbs. And human population growth, environmental alteration, increases in worldwide trade have created many more opportunities for them to get here and be introduced and to spread. Importation of goods and things are how they're spreading. The source of that was the Ohio Invasive Plants Council, which is a great website to go to for more information. So Ohio has about 3,000 plant species known to occur in the wild in the state that have been documented. 75% of those approximately are native plants. So that they were saying those were present before the time of the more substantial European settlement, which they're talking it to be around 1750 for Ohio. So of the remaining 25%, which is about 700 non-native plants, really out of that, only under 100 are known to be problems in natural areas that are really causing the problems, where the invasiveness is not just unchecked, but it's really wrecking the habitats and the other natural plants there. The most invasive of those, out of that 25%, fewer than 100, they're wreaking havoc in the wetlands, woodlands, and the prairies. Again, the source is the Ohio Invasive Plants Council. Kind of talked about that before, and I'm sorry if that's repetitive. The invasive species can be introduced by ship ballast water, firewood also, accidental release, and by people. Human actions actually are the primary means of invasive species introduction. We import these, they look pretty, we brought them here for medicinal purposes and for seasonings. They spread in many ways. Animals eat the fruit of the seeds. They distribute that in excrement, like wind can distribute the seeds. Self-propagation, we'll talk about that later. Many of these plants are invasive and can multiply rapidly. And also their root systems send up shoots to help multiply them. So the impact we've talked about a little bit. Invasive species can lead to the extinction of native plants and animals. It destroys biodiversity, and that can permanently alter habitats. It does different things to the soil, changes levels of the soil, the root systems are different, and what it can crowd out is really important here. So I'm going to start with aquatic invasives. Zebra mussels, if you've walked on any of the Lake Erie beaches here, which I was just on, crunch, crunch, crunch. I looked for sea glass, and you got to crunch through all the zebra mussels to get those sea glass. It's just unbelievable. The invasive Asian carp, also the big head carp, silver carp, black carp, and fertile grass carps. I know a little bit about this. Grass carps were brought in to eat some of the invasive weeds in ponds, especially farm ponds around here. My parents actually bought some to keep the weeds down on farm property we had that we dammed up an area, and the grass carp were great. They eat their weight and all that, but the ones that you buy from nurseries in Ohio, they're supposed to be infertile. But what happened is some fertile ones somehow got released, or it's a case of nature finding a way, which does happen, and they've become fertile and they absolutely invade. Another one is the sea lamprey. They're parasitic. They feed on fish. They have suckers they attach to native fish. Ohio actually has 6 other lampreys that are native. Not a threat to sport fishing, but the sea lampreys are. And even though it says sea lamprey, they are in Lake Erie and they don't have to have salt water. It's a bit of a misnomer. Then we have 2 in the crayfish family, the red swamp crayfish and the rusty crayfish. I think Don has talked about the rusty crayfish before. You might have even seen it. Maybe I'm confusing that with some other show, but you'll know they look very different. They're darker, the rusty color, the red color for both of those.
If I can interrupt for just a,
Please.
if I can interrupt for just a second, just wanted to mention on YouTube, ODNR has a very, very good video that's about 15-20 minutes long on what the sea lamprey is doing in the Great Lakes and what they and the other departments are trying to do about that.
Oh, great. You can throw that link on when you put my show up on the website too.
Yeah, I will. That's
great. And then for fish, we have the round goby, the rough, and the white perch. And I did not know that white perch was invasive until I did this either. I was kind of surprised because unfortunately I've caught a few of those. The other thing about the fish is unwanted exotic pets that were released. And I have unfortunately taken pictures in Ohio of in streams and ponds of large goldfish. And I took one when I was at Wakena Nature Preserve. I was with my friend Starry, and there were definitely goldfish in there. And I can just see somebody on a Saturday hike or whatever. Well, we don't want to keep these fish anymore. Let's just let them out. And, very bad idea. They're large, and unfortunately, other exotic pets also being released. And we've talked about the pythons in Florida before on the show too. The bait trade. This is also a source of a problem that I really didn't realize, and Dawn may elaborate on this one. I do fish, but not as much in Ohio anymore as I used to. But the bait trade is a problem, and they're trying to educate bait sellers about transferring invasive live fish, because if they escape off the hook, if they're still live bait that you're using, they do not belong in our waterways here. And I do not know what that is. And that could have been the white perch maybe, or the round goby. I'm not sure what was being sold as bait fish that happened to. Another invasive on the aquatic list is the curly leaf pondweed. can take over, lose oxygenation of the pond. Hydrilla, which I did not know was in Ohio. I worked on this when I worked for Congress in the 1980s, starting in 1981 to 87 or 88, sorry. Hydrilla is a problem in the Potomac River. The Potomac River actually a lot of times gets quite saline. We've talked about that before, from the Chesapeake Bay also, and also when they have droughts in the summertime. Hydrilla was really taking over and choking up waterways all over Northern Virginia and the Chesapeake Bay area also. I had to learn about it, and my boss, living, having a constituency in Northern Virginia, the congressman, had me study all I could, and I got reports about hydrilla. And there's a picture of it on the bottom right. It's like on a single stop with multiple sort of leaves that come off of that underwater plant. Grows in thick mats. Fishermen really hate it. You can't see what's going on. You get lots of snags. Takes over. It's a problem with oxygen in the water. And I remember from one of the speeches that I wrote for him was that hydrilla self-propagates 6 ways. So again, with invasive species, they find a way to reproduce, and to reproduce quickly, and to spread. Okay. So this is another one. We're going to move on to mammals. There's actually only one invasive species of mammal found in Ohio. Can any of you at all guess what that might be? Oh, you probably saw that, but
Wasn't it the zebra? I thought the zebra mussel up here in the Lake Erie was.
but not a mammal though. So this is a mammal.
Oh, mammal. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're one of the worst. So only invasive mammal found in Ohio. And I was surprised that there was just one. Very surprised. So let's go on. The wild boar, also called the wild swine or the Eurasian wild pig, the only invasive mammal in Ohio. So yeah, I know, very surprising. So the Eurasian wild boar crossed with escaped domestic pigs is what's happened. They were brought to the US, introduced here in 1539. Grasp that for a second. They are in 30 states, including Ohio. And they do a lot of crop damage, particularly corn and soybean, which are problems in Ohio. They do a lot of damage to the land, and there is threat from disease from them also. They are mostly in, and again, how Don had talked about glaciation and how the geology is key to a lot of different species, everything in Ohio and the settlement of Ohio. So mostly in Adams, Athens, Champaign, Gallia, Hocking, Jackson, Lawrence, Site, and Vinton counties. Mahoning County, talk on it, I'm just breathing this and it goes. Mahoning County recently have found a population, and they seem to find more and more in northeastern Ohio now, coming in from Pennsylvania, presumably.
Aren't they a problem as far as attacking people too?
They are. Javelinas more so too, in South and Southwest too, but there are a problem with that. Pretty brutal. And even in pioneer times, they talked about the wild boars, wild hogs attacking people. We don't hear of that as much in Ohio now, but it's mostly the crop damage. Where they are, they'll go and they just stomp down an area. In the middle picture on the right, you see the mud hole, and that's one of the characteristics. If you find this on your land, that's what they do. They carry 30 viral and bacterial diseases and nearly 40 parasites that are transmittable to people, pets, livestock, and wildlife. So that's some serious stuff. And you can see like the tree where it's rubbed down. There's a hoof print on the left in that picture, if you can see that, but they do a lot of damage. We heard one when we were in, my husband and I were in one of the national parks in South Carolina. They warned us of that. We were going at kind of dusk time. We just pulled into the park late and walking a boardwalk, and we heard one, and we had to kind of quickly get out of there. We were a little nervous about it. They're kind of scary. So So moving out from animals, I've got so much to cover here. Insects and diseases are the next category. The European corn borer, which they get into the ears and rots it out, and that's a huge crop in Ohio. That's a huge consideration. The Asian longhorned beetle has been here for a while, and you'll know it when you see it. There's one called the walnut twig beetle, which obviously is attacking our hardwood walnut trees. Emerald ash borer, you probably know a lot about that. It's been in Ohio since 2003. It was first found in southeastern Michigan in 2002. We have lost tens of millions of trees over 30 states. And the source, they said, likely was wood packing materials from imported goods. The next one I have is the hemlock woolly adelgid, which I had to look up the pronunciation of that one. Obviously attacking hemlock trees. Gypsy moth, there was a problem when I lived in Virginia with that, and we had an infestation in one of our trees in our house there, and they did this insecticide and they wrapped them in burlap so they couldn't get up the bark and stuff. I think it was either last summer or last fall, maybe late last summer, they were doing aerial spraying in my area. They were leaving from Don Scott Field here. I would see the planes taking off, and we got a notice in our door about aerial spraying during certain times, especially early in the morning. And I did see them come over and make their passes and stuff. They assured us that it was that I think it was the BT that they did, like a fungus thing that they spray. I think that was called that. Oh, I can't remember the name right now, but they said it doesn't affect humans at all. But I still stayed inside. So there is a problem moving in of gypsy moth, and just the deforestation there is terrible with that. There's something else called the codling moth, which I have not heard too much about yet. The next thing I'm going to go into more are the hammerhead and the jumping worms, which I think I mentioned jumping worms before, but now the hammerheads recently have been found in northeastern Ohio. And then the spotted lanternfly, which I think they've had one report now in Ohio, but it's getting close. The spotted lanternfly likes grapes, hops, and the tree of heaven, which I'll talk about later, which is invasive, and I am fighting a couple in my yard actually. So that spotted lanternfly is quite unusual. There's the picture there to the right. With a lot of these, if you see them, and I'll talk more about the worms in a minute, but particularly the spotted lanternfly, they want to know about it. Ohio Department of Agriculture needs to know, and I've got a phone number there and an email address for the plant pest control section for Ohio Department of Agriculture. And it's, as you can see, very brightly colored, very distinctive. So I added these in the last minute for the show here because I saw an article in the Dispatch that it's now in northeastern Ohio. None have yet been found in Columbus of the hammerhead worms. But it's important to note, do not take a shovel and cut them in half. They're very distinctive. You can see by the named after the shark, the hammerhead. They reproduce asexually and they regenerate. So if you cut it in half, then you have two worms and so on. The best way to kill those, same way I do slugs, I use salt or you drop them into rubbing alcohol to kill them. And OSU Extension Office or Department of Agriculture, you need to find somebody to notify if you see them, because of not being yet in Columbus. If you're digging in your garden and you see a worm that looks like that, pick it up in a vial and call the Ag Extension Office or the Department of Agriculture and get through to somebody.
Can you feed them to the chickens?
You know what? I don't know. I would not. And that might be something to ask them. I don't know what they're carrying.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, we don't know.
Chickens love slugs.
Yeah, they love slugs. That's right. I don't know what these guys are carrying, and I would not till we know more.
Okay.
They're still trying to study what the damage could be from these. And then I think I maybe shared an article about the Asian jumping worms before also. Oh, darn it. Those are here now. And like even mulch places and places that are selling topsoil here, they're all throughout those. And maybe it was a talk that I had by Jim McCormick. I do not remember, but they're there and they call them crazy worms, snake worms. They writhe and they jump all over the place. They're much more active, I think maybe a little bit darker than our earthworms, even though our earthworms are not natural here. These Asian jumping worms came to the West Coast in the early 1900s. And I have a couple of quotes I thought were really important about what the problem is with those, which we don't know yet about those hammerhead worms. But the Asian jumping worms are degrading the soil quality. They voraciously devour organic matter, more so than our earthworms that we do have here that were brought here. And they leave large amounts of castings. That on that picture up there, all of those brown crumbly coffee bits are castings from their poop from the worms. And they live and feed at a shallower level than our earthworms we have right now. And so our earthworms we have now do more deeper aeration of the soil. These new ones are too close to the surface, so it even exacerbates drying out the soil in the heat of the summer. They create a loose seedbed, difficult for plant roots to be established. They leave the soil more susceptible to erosion. And the worms, these Asian jumping worms, have been observed to be feeding on roots of young plants. So that's not good. With these, the adults do not survive the winter, unlike our earthworms we have right now. They have eggs that overwinter in the soil, and they're in cocoons. They said the size of a pencil eraser. And then early summer is when the adults start appearing. And you'll know they curl up and they do crazy things when you expose them. They writhe around and curl around and stuff. So, and they just don't know what they're going to do. The control and the long-term prognosis still being studied. And then there is a website you can do an online report. Go to osu.edu, Asian jumping worms. So, to report these things. Next category I have are fungi. Chestnut blight. We talked about that a lot. If you were there for my Chestnut Ridge Metro Park talk I did there. It's a disease of the American chestnut tree, which used to really cover a lot of the East Coast, particularly the Appalachians. Early 1900s, it wiped out most of the chestnut trees in most of the eastern part of the United States. And then we also have Dutch elm disease, which is mostly northeastern Ohio. And then I think I maybe mentioned before with the chestnut blight, it was brought into, it was the zoo in New York, I believe is how that started. Dutch elm disease, actually, this was introduced near Cleveland in the 1930s with some nursery stock that was brought in. So it was mostly northeastern Ohio that was affected by Dutch elm disease, but it is still infecting trees across the United States. And my little tidbit I never knew, because I figured it came in here from Holland. It's not from Holland. The name refers to a group of Dutch women who were researching it, which is kind of cool to know. I'll just blame Holland for that. Just like we blame Canada for a lot of our Canada goose problem, which is not true either. So going on to plants, in Ohio, 38 plants have been declared invasive. And the quote from the law of that says, no person shall sell, offer for sale, propagate, distribute, import, or intentionally cause the dissemination of any invasive plant in the state of Ohio. So I'm gonna run through their common names quickly here, and then I have a little call out with pictures and things of some of the more common ones you might know about and wonder how to get rid of. So tree of heaven, which, as I said, I am fighting in my yard. I just saw it growing again in my front yard, right on the foundation of my house. I am not happy. Garlic mustard, which we probably know a lot about that in the parks. A lot of people for Earth Day have been trying to remove it. And that was brought here for seasonings. It's edible. Supposed to be good for the stomach and things. Common barberry, which is now you can't sell that anymore, which unfortunately somebody had planted that in my yard, which I think I've completely gotten rid of now. The flowering rush, the oriental bittersweet, which was brought here for ornamental purposes. My parents used to have it on the side of their house. Spotted knapweed, the teasel, which you know all over the fields here. There's a cutleaf teasel. The other one I must not have had a name for it. Elodia, I'm not sure what that one is. Egeria densa Brazilian Elodia, I'm not sure of that one at all. The Russian olive, which we know is a problem. So then I have some pictures here. The left side is tree of heaven, And unfortunately, you may have this in your yards. You've seen it on roadsides.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
I didn't know originally what it was, kept trying to chop it out. When I was working in my beds trying to get rid of it, I would have a rash, and I kept thinking, I don't get poison ivy. And my skin would itch intensely. I would really wash and wash trying to get off and scrub, and I would have a rash afterwards. And I figured out that's what it is.
oh,
Tree of heaven will cause a skin rash. And if you chop it and start chopping at it, it makes it worse. The roots release toxic chemicals that will now stunt your neighboring plants. And it also sends signals to the root to spread more and to spread the roots out more. When it's being threatened and attacked, it spreads more. And on these, I'm going to tell you something that I just hate to say, because we have discussed Roundup a lot here. And I don't know how to balance this, because most of these are gotten rid of by Roundup. And there are no other solutions for many of these. So when you're near waterways, this is why they're invasive.
oh.
And I've been doing a project. I had to quit because of some shoulder problems, but at High Banks, and because Olentangy is a wild and scenic river, they can't just go over and spray herbicide to get rid of these invasive ecological disaster areas that are right along the Olentangy. They can't do anything about it except for they have an invasive removal team, and they just keep hacking away at it. And it is hard, laborious work. So for Tree of Heaven, the only way to get rid of it is to apply systemic herbicide July to September. And you've got to do it before, when it's not growing up as much as when it's growing down to feed the roots. So you have to apply, the timing on all of these is really important. So it's July to September is the window for Tree of Heaven. That thing also sets a lot of seeds. It's a mess. You just got to keep attacking the root year after year to get rid of it. Garlic mustard is a little bit easier, but there's so much of it. You have to pull it low at its base. It's pretty easy to get rid of the roots of that if you're in moist, loamy soil and it's been raining lately there. But they said don't pull it and leave it, which I've unfortunately seen people do. Don't pull it and leave it by the trail. It's going to spread its seeds and its roots can reroot. Bag it. You need to pull it low at the base and bag it up. Autumn olive, which we see by the highways a lot and all over. The autumn olive tree can, single tree or bush, whatever it's called, I guess, can produce up to 200,000 seeds at each crop. The best method of this is hand pulling the seedlings when they're really small. And then if it's larger, thicker stumps, you apply herbicide when you've cut the tree down after you cut it back, just trying to do it at the time when it will take the foam, the herbicide down into its roots. Japanese knotweed, this is all around High Banks too. I've been trying to get rid of this. Can be in very large patches. And when you remove it, you need a restoration plan for the area, especially because it's large patches. You're going to have runoff and soil damage from this also. Again, they recommend a foam herbicide or targeted application of liquids in the fall. You've got to do it before a killing frost. You prune it back, lop it off, apply the weed killer. The one problem with that is the rhizomes can lie dormant for many years, and it's just a constant process of trying to get rid of it. Teasels are from Asia. They said before it flowers, you need to cut the stalks down to stop the seed production. This is why they do controlled burns, because burning or herbicides before they start bolting is the best way to control those. But if you get them before they set those heads and set the seeds, you can help control the area quite a bit. And again, bag it. Don't just obviously cut the heads off and throw them down. Canada thistles, those are all over, fields full of them in Ohio. They are not from Canada. They are from Eastern and Northern Europe. I do not know why they got the name Canada thistles, but they do. Seeds can remain dormant in the soil for up to 20 years.
Jeez.
The roots go down 1.5 feet and they're very thick and fibrous. I have tried to get rid of those many times. Long fibrous taproot is more like a tree and bark sapling, instead of a normal plant. So you really, oh shoot, you're not going to be able to pull it and expect to get it all. It goes down so deep. And if there's even a small fragment of one of the roots, little fibrous roots left in there, it'll regenerate itself. And the deal with that is to just control as best you can by mowing or cutting it down before the seeds are set. When it's at the bud stage, which is probably about now, or late in the season, you can apply herbicides to it. The next one, which I have fought, and unfortunately I may have done this slide twice, I just looked at this, multiflora rose, which is from Japan, Eastern China and Korea. It was brought to the US in 1866, and they brought it in to be rootstock, which is what they're grafting ornamental roses to try to help propagate and build new species of ornamental roses. So they thought, well, this will be a new rootstock. Apparently it had properties that were resistant to some of the diseases that ornamental roses were getting here. So they do that, trying to combine it to make the ornamental roses hardier. In the 1930s, they sold it as a living fence or to confine livestock and to hold soil from eroding. It is very widespread in Ohio because all those reasons, for the fence, cheaper than putting barbed wire up or whatever, confining your livestock. So particularly in rural Ohio, but it is all over. Any place that used to be a farm, which is pretty much most of Ohio, it's all over the place there. For small plants, you can pull the roots. It is quite easy to eradicate with proper timing of herbicides. There has been a biological control since '87 with a mite, and there's also a wasp, but they're using that can inject it and control it. And I've also read that they're working on other biological, like a fungus or something that can give it. But the problem is with that one is that it can also attack ornamental roses in people's gardens, and that's a problem there. I've worked on controlling that, and I had to buy special arm protectors at Snagless Pants, and mine were like they say a knife couldn't cut you when you put these arm things on, because I was getting torn up trying to get rid of this multiflora rose all over high banks. It was a mess. So I think I have some duplication. I really apologize for this. Autumn olive, hairy willow herb, glossy buckthorn, which I unfortunately fight in my yard too. Giant hogweed, which has been in the news a lot because you get a horrible blistering rash. And once you know and you can identify and see it as you're driving down highways and backcountry roads, it's just lining some of our roadways, and you can't touch it. You'll huge blistery rashes. It's horrible. Dame's rocket, which is blooming right now, I did not know that was invasive until I worked on this one. It looks kind of like our wild blue phlox that's blooming right now, only it's like a rounder, clumpier head. And that is actually, I know like at High Banks Riverway, that River Park, the new part of it is blooming in there. It's blooming all over High Banks right now too. Hydrilla, we talked about with the aquatic plants before, something called European frog bit. Then we've got the Japanese honeysuckle, which is different from our bush honeysuckle, the Amber honeysuckle. The Japanese has like a ropey, twisty, viney thing that will go and strangle trees. There is plenty of that in High Banks. That is not as hard to remove. You cut that vine down and cut it back. And with the honeysuckles, there's Morris honeysuckle, Tatarian honeysuckle, all of those. There's a tool you can use that will dig down deep and around the base of it. You can pop those roots out, but it's extremely labor intensive again to get rid of those. Purple loose strife is another one that clogs around the waterways. There's a European wand loose strife, Japanese stilt grass, and something called parrot feather, which is actually quite a pretty grass, but very damaging. So the buckthorn is at the top left picture here. You may have it in your yard. I have it in my flower beds. I fight and fight and fight it. From Eurasia, it was introduced for fence rows to contain livestock. Hand pull small populations, but they can come back from the root fragments, which many of these do. Cut back and apply herbicide during the growing season, as opposed to the other ones when it's dormant and is pulling into the roots. It's kind of glossy looking. That's how I know it in my yard. It says swampy areas. It's actually by where my gutter drain from the roof is, and water must splash out there. It just seems to be really happy there. the other, and that's the fruit of it right now, the little berries that it has. One of the problems, and something in common with many of these, as I said, they can live in a variety of soils. They can live in the clay soils, acidic soils here. They can live in a lot of places. That's why they are so successful and become so invasive here. Honeysuckle, we've kind of talked about. Those are the berries that it gets. That's what on the right is what it's looking like right now. It's blooming. It came from China, the Far East, Korea, Japan, Central Asia, and Russia. Brought to the US as ornamental plants in the late 1800s. And they were promoted for landscaping and for wildlife cover. And if you repeatedly cut them to the ground level, that can help when they're in shady areas, which I have some under one of my silver maple trees in the backyard. And I can't tear up my maple tree roots to get at it, but it's strangling the tree roots. It's a mess, but we just keep cutting it back to ground level. Which is what we're doing with the project, the invasive removals at High Banks also. You cut them back, you've got to keep going back in, cut them back, cut them back, cut them back. What also helps, again, is the prescribed burning, pulling the young plants. And in the fall, you can paint the woody stumps with herbicide. In metro parks, I might have discussed before, there are only a couple of people in all of metro parks, like maybe 2 guys that can do this, that have the license to be able to use the herbicides on it. And then again, because of the waterways, you have to be really careful if you can use it at all. That's why they just can't get in and remove it that easily. So, and we're still in that 38 list of the ones in Ohio. Eurasian water milfoil, the yellow floating heart, common reeds, curly leaf pongweed, again, talked about that with the aquatics. Kudzu, which is moving here from the south and taking over southern Ohio. I keep seeing more and more of those vines at the side of the road that just envelop and take over plants and grow up and over. Calorie pear, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Fig buttercup, also called lesser celandine. Not like the native buttercup. That is a big problem in marshy areas. Kiwanis has a big problem. Where I live at the bottom of Hard Road, which is what turns into Olentangy at 315 there. That's just covered with it. I used to think, oh, what beautiful, beautiful buttercups there are there, and beautiful yellow flowers very early. Yeah, bad. At Whetstone Park, it's terrible along the river there. I was looking at some owls a couple weeks ago, and my friend said Jim McCormick described that area as an ecological disaster. It's absolutely covered with that. The European buckthorn, I gave you an example of that already. Multiflora rose we've discussed. There's a water chestnut here that is invasive. Narrow leaf cattail, a hybrid cattail, and black dog, also called the strangling vine or black swallowwort. So those are the 38 in Ohio that they consider the invasive plants. That's a picture of the purple loosestrife, and that was brought from Europe in the early 1800s and Asia. It was a medicinal plant to help with diarrhea, dysentery, and as an astringent. It likes wetlands, which is where we see it. And our native fens, our marshes, the wetlands, it just chokes them out. You see it now in ditches a lot of times, drainage ditches. Black swamp area where they've done the drainage ditches, this covers that. It flowers June to September, so it's just about to start bursting forth. Each plant, and look at that picture of the flower stalks. Each plant can set 2 to 3 million seeds per year. How to get rid of it? Hand pulling and bagging. I know Flo, the Friends of the Lower Olentangy Watershed, they have constant projects with that. But it's a mess. You do not mow this. It just disperses more seeds. And because it tends to grow where the water supplies are and the groundwater problems, there are only a few herbicides that can even be used for this, if at all. Since 1994, Ohio has been releasing a beetle at 30 test sites around Lake Erie. And this beetle will only feed on this plant. So I don't know the success yet, but they're just trying to discover things. And I don't know what's going to keep that beetle in control either. That worries me up the road too. The picture on the right is, I took that at, I think that's one that I took at Whetstone Park. And that's that lesser celandine fig buttercup. Very, very hard to control. Again, in wetlands, moist, woody floodplains, and fringe forest areas. It's not the same as the marsh marigold, so don't confuse it with that, which is also around. The lesser celandine has bulblets, tubers, and seeds, so it has lots of ways to spread. Again, same thing with the loosestrife and others. It's in water areas with water sources, so there's a very big limit on what you can use as an herbicide to safely get rid of it. In Ohio, it's very widespread and crowds out the natives. So a special section, because there's news on that this year, is the Callery pear, also the Bradford pear. This was brought to the US from Asia, early 1900s, for rootstock because it was resistant to fire blight, which was a problem with pear crops here. So areas that grow fruit crops, brought this in. They wanted to graft the rootstock to try to develop cultivars that were more resistant to the blights. A good reason to bring it in, but bad because this thing has a problem.
Oh.
When they were just using it for rootstock, wasn't as much of a problem, but in the 60s, when they started planting it as ornamental trees, they lined roads. Oh, it grows fast and it's so pretty with the flowers. And as we know, the trees, the urban and suburban streets get lined with it. It gets downtown, gets planted in backyards. My neighbor had a whole forest of them. Most of them now with windstorms and things have fallen apart and been taken down. But little bits of them pop up in my yard now that I'm trying to get rid of.
Mhm.
The Callery pear was named for a French missionary named Joseph Callery, who collected it in 1858, probably as a missionary to Asia somewhere. And then they did a breeding project with it. And this blight-resistant edible pear tree was a guy named Bradford, was the first successful plant from that breeding project. When they were bred as ornamental trees, they were not supposed to have fruit. They do have little small, they look like berry-sized fruits, which some birds do eat that, unfortunately, which means they spread the seeds more and more. So because there is so much existing nursery stock, unfortunately, nurseries that have commercial contracts and things, they still plant that along streets as street trees and at businesses because they grow quickly, they're cheap and plentiful. And so the nurseries kind of fought this. So they agreed that they're going to add it to the Ohio invasive species plant list January 2023. So up until then, you can still plant it. Some of its characteristics, it's stinky, very stinky blossoms. And the crotch areas from the trunk, it's got a fairly small trunk, but to form that nice shape, it has these larger branches that go out, and they're very susceptible. They're not very strong, they're very weak in the crotch area, and they break off in storms. My fence has a big dent in it from the neighbor that had planted a bunch of those a long time ago. And it just happens. They have a very shallow root system. And here's part of the problem. They send up shoots to start new trees. So you have a mother tree, and then they just have lots of little daughters all over the place. Again, a seed dispersal by birds through droppings from eating their fruit. And when you try to pull, even when they're young, and try to pull them out, their root fragments will sprout and grow more trees. Difficult to eradicate. Herbicides applied to fresh cuts in the stems. Like if you girdle the tree, you cut all around it and apply herbicide inside of that all the way around. As if you treat it again and again and again, you can eventually get rid of it. But it's not sure it's going to get down to all those little root fragments and grow more trees. So this picture, I'm not sure how well you can see this, but it just shows, oh, maybe it's a later picture. I'm sorry. That's what it looks like anyway. I've got a later picture. Maybe it is. I guess you can kind of see in the back of this. I wish I had a larger version, but in the back of that, you have the one tree in the front, but in the back, those are all Callery pear trees in the land surrounding that.
Is that what you see along the freeway towards Westerville?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. On 270 lining it. It is all over and, very distinctive when it's blooming. Along Hard Road next to this new maintenance facility next to, like across from the high school, there is a huge field of trees there. And when they bloom, then it is all cowrie pear. There's
Hmm.
probably one large old growth tree in there. The rest are all cowrie pear. Just awful. But yeah, all those pretty white trees and street trees, like all over. Columbus planted them for years and years and years.
That's interesting.
Oh, this is the picture I was thinking of. Okay, so this is a picture of southwestern Ohio. It was in a park or something. And these first two were the trees that were planted. Pretty trees, to break up the grass monoculture there. And then look in the back.
Oh my.
Yeah. You plant those two and it grew a whole forest of these.
Mm.
This was from News 5 Cleveland. I saw on their site an article about that. They call it the smelly Jekyll and Hyde tree, going to be banned in Ohio come 2023. But yeah, that's a reality check of what happens.
Mm.
The mowing around the other trees keeps the population down in that area. But between the seed dispersal and the underground root system, that's what they grew. But that's why they're invasive. So I talked about the basal bark treatments where you do that cut, girdle a tree all the way around. Here are the herbicides used: basil oil applied to the circumference of the tree, lower 12 to 8 inches. Oops, sorry, I'm so sorry, my stupid computer. These are just various products that can be used also. Oil-based herbicide formulations, 1-to-4 mixture. Again, these are for professionals, people who are licensed to use these. But with the cowrie pear, you have to do a fresh cut before you apply these herbicides. Again, labor intensive. Then they talked about pulling up the small plants by hand. Ineffective, you make the root angry. Mowing can keep them low. It's ineffective to eradicate, but you can kind of save a field by consistent mowing to get rid of the small ones. Unbelievable. And multiflora rose, I said I was going to circle back to that. And I just said, what a pain. Literally every rose has its thorns. They were planted by the roadways to stop erosion. And when the highway would come in and do a cut, scoop the road out and regrade the banks, we planted these there. Sold as a natural privacy fence to contain livestock, and is now really infested the agricultural land. Asian in origin, it propagates rapidly from seeds and stems which root easily. Again, with this one, mowing to keep the seedlings from developing seeds helps. Prescribed burns is probably a better way, but again, the roots can be dormant for a long time. To even get into these dense areas, you have to kind of whack your way back in and cut back and use your loppers to cut back to thin the area out before you can even treat it. And that's what I was doing at High Banks. It won't be treated there because it's by the river, but it's just a mess. It's thick. And the days that I'd have to work in there, working for 2 or 3 hours, I might get maybe 2 to 3 of those plants cut back. And it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Herbicide, late winter, early spring. And again, it might take several rounds of years to put applications down for this. Researchers are looking into biological agents, something called a rose seed chalcid. It's a small wasp and a virus, but again, the virus could infect native roses. There are tools which the Metro Parks has a few of those to help remove that root cluster, but very, very labor intensive. And then that's kind of the end of the slideshow of this one. So these are the resources that he'll put on there about how to remove the knotweed, tree of heaven, fact sheet on teasels, Canada thistles, multiflora. So for your own gardening, OSU, and there are lots of YouTubes on how to remove also. OSU Extension Office, any county ag extension office also will have information on that too. The Ohio Department of Agriculture has fact sheets. Google it for advice on it, but it's one of those good luck. It's really hard. So we're kind of running over. But I've got a few more things I want to show over here. But do I have any questions here right now about any of those? You guys okay? And if you do, and you can email Dawn or put it on the Facebook group or whatever, and I can try to answer, because I know some people that are good specialists, and I've been working out there trying to help out. It's a mess. So
Mm.
I'm going to
I
do
have
some
a-
pictures. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I have a question, but I don't know if this is well, it spreads. I haven't had it before, but I got it last year. It's like it's called Velcro weed. And
Yeah.
oh my God, I never had it. And then all of a sudden I'm like, what is this stuff?
And I get
And
into that walking in the woods, and you come out stuck all over you. The burrs and the
oh,
leaves
it
all come
is.
out. It's a
And
mess.
it's scratchy when you go to pull it,
Yep.
but I mean, it's not horrible, but I was ripping a bunch out last year, and I don't see quite as much this year, but I see some, and I'm trying to get it right now before it, gets going. Oh my Lord.
I've been fighting creeping Charlie in my yard too. And that's been a mess too. And you just have to keep after it and pull it too. But I mean, one of the things you can do, you can weaken the plant itself by just continual pulling. But again, it's hard. It's so aggressive. And that one, I think that one unfortunately might be a native. I'll have to look it up. I'm not really sure, but that might be a native one. But again, we have houses that were on pasture land and former farmland and all that, and we got all kinds of stuff that invades us. But that one's awful. That
I
just,
know.
and it'll get under my socks when I'm working, and scratchy. It's just terrible. Velcro weed, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot, all of it's a lot of work.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's a constant fight. Just unbelievable. So I'm let me minimize this again. I'm gonna just quickly go through these. A lot of these are just right off my camera and unedited, because I have not had time. So they're not my best of the pictures, but I'll edit them and put them up later. But I'm gonna go through some of the warblers that I saw. It was just astounding. And there was, like I said, was an unbelievable day at McGee Marsh. I went to Howard Marsh and Metzger Marsh also, and it was just unreal. This is one of my favorites. This is a prothonotary warbler. I got the one catching an insect here on the upper left. And these are actually around Columbus right now. They're going through fast. Duranzo's had quite a few. High Banks, Inniswood, I've seen a few around there. Glen Echo Ravine has been incredible this year, but just a couple of the prothonotary warbler, just absolutely gorgeous. This is a black-throated green on the left, having a little eat right there. Probably had an insect or something it ate. The bottom right is a magnolia warbler, one of my favorites. Both of those two were in huge abundance. It got so I would not take pictures of them anymore. There were so many of them. And I've never seen so many as those two. And Glen Echo went there a couple of days, absolutely full of these guys, the bright yellows and so pretty. This is one of my favorites, a Blackburnian warbler. The left is the male. Oh, darn it. And the right is the female, just same kind of colors, just a little more muted. Again, we've been seeing a lot of those at Duranzo Park, which is at Fishinger Road, just on the other side on the other side of the bridge. So bright. This is a chestnut-sided warbler. The picture on the right kind of cracked me up. I don't know what he was doing, fluffing up, but it says his name. It's got little chestnut stripes on the sides of it. Very, very pretty little bird. These birds, you don't have an idea, but these are quite small branches they're on. A willow is on the bottom one. And they're like a couple of ounces. These warblers are like 2 or 4 ounces. They're tiny little birds. And they've just flown like 2,000 miles. They're just absolutely incredible. That's why I'm fascinated. This is a bay-breasted warbler, which obviously says its name right there out loud with its colors. And you can kind of see by the new leaves coming out. These things are so small, they're like the size of a leaf. The top left is a black and white warbler. The bottom left is a yellow warbler, which I said I'm going to stop taking pictures. How many hundreds of pictures do you need of those guys? But they're just so bright and cheerful, and Some of the birders call them lemon drops. They're just so pretty. A little bit of reddish stripy on their chest, and a beautiful song. Their song sounds like sweet, sweet, I'm so sweet. The right one with the black cap on it's called a Wilson's warbler, which are not as common. I walked almost 8 miles to see one at Glacier, all up and down the horse trail. But I was chasing a couple of things, a black-billed cuckoo and this Wilson's warbler. I've never seen a black-billed cuckoo, so I was dumb enough. I was cuckoo enough because they sent me out the wrong direction on the equestrian trail. Then I had to double back, and then I had to walk all the way through it and then back again. And I just had one tiny glimpse, and this was not the picture. I got this one at McGee. After walking all day, so I could hardly walk 8 miles, I saw him at McGee finally. This is a wood duck up a tree. When you're birding, you just have to look everywhere and you find things, unexpected places. And that's the Drake wood duck, absolutely beautiful. And I got a few pictures of him and he flew off. Look at that, like popped out orange eye, and their colors are gorgeous. Somebody else spotted a nighthawk in one of the trees. I have not processed that photo yet, but that was so cool seeing the nighthawk. But that is a Drake wood duck. His hen flew by and he flew off and joined her, and they flew down shortly after I took this. This is a Baltimore Oriole. They're back. At your feeders, they like grape jelly and oranges. And somebody had put some grape jelly on a log in the parking lot, or on some twigs in the parking lot. So I just was sitting in my friend's car, just taking pictures of Baltimore Orioles while we rested. I've talked about this one before. This is a Kirtland's warbler. This is the rarest warbler. And 40 or so years ago, I think, or no, 50 years ago, it was down to, I think, 20 birds left in the world. I have seen them 3 times, which was over on 2 days of this trip. Very, very rare. I know by 1972, they had them up to about 200. I don't know what their population is now, but they have recently been removed from the endangered list. Maybe they're threatened now, not endangered. They reproduce in the jack pine forests in Michigan, and very limited population. They only like trees, I believe, that are between, I don't want to say it wrong, between like 7, maybe it was like 7 to 13 years old. It's a very limited age of trees that they will nest in a very limited area. And the jack pines only release the seeds from their pine cones to grow new trees with fire. And because of firefighting, trying to stop forest fires, they didn't realize there were no younger growth jack pine forests, which is what brought these down to absolutely almost no population at all. But they recognized in time and worked on a program to reestablish the forest and to protect these guys. The brown-headed cowbirds were also parasitizing their nests by laying in them and pushing out their eggs. And so they have eradication programs to get rid of brown-headed cowbirds from nesting in their area also. But it was a thrill. That's the best picture I've taken of one, to see this little guy that is so threatened. And they live in the Bahamas in the wintertime. So good choice. On the left is a a northern water thrush, which I'd never seen before, a life bird for me. Camouflage very well. It likes kind of mucky, marshy areas and really likes to hide in the shadows. And that was kind of cool to see. Picks up little wormy things out of the soil. The right one is an American redstart, which is a gorgeous bird. I love its little song, and really cute little bird. This was kind of an odd thing. This is a red bat. They're migratory. And usually they like to fold themselves up in beech leaves. And you can often, this time of year as they're coming through, you can unfold curled up beech leaves and they'll be inside of there. But it's a little red bat. And this was just hanging on a tree right by the boardwalk at McGee. And I don't know who saw that. It looked like just a bump or a flower or something on there. And up close is this tiny little guy. It was so cute. So that is it that I have right now. I have so many more pictures to share, but that's all I've got. We are way over time, but I wanted to share some of the really cool things I've been seeing lately. Anybody have any questions?
Why are they not asking us to feed the deer right now? Because they're going up in the neighborhood and eating everything.
Oh, the deer, yeah. I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know with the birds. I still haven't heard. Oh, some of the parks are getting rid of the feeders right now with birds. I talked about before. They've had maybe I haven't about. I don't know what the latest number is. It's like 18 bald eagles around Toledo have died. A lot of hawks are dying too from this um, chicken or the avian flu that's going around right now with migratory birds. But the deer I haven't heard about. Dawn, do you know anything about that?
No, I do not. That's news to me.
Well, even I guess Worthington just put through a law that you can't feed them.
Wow.
I don't know why, because I think it would deter them from going up into the neighborhoods.
Yeah, they're so bad. And I did hear about the Worthington law, actually. I remember reading about that. And going after the hostas and the ornamental plants and things. But
Mm-hmm.
they're after the feeders and things. I don't think you can stop this.
Mm-hmm.
They munch your grass and the clover. It'd be like, stop feeding the rabbits. Well, they eat the clover in my yard and they eat my
Yeah, you can't
Asiatic
stop
lilies.
that.
I know. So I don't know how, but I'm sure there are people who put corn out and things for them. You'd be feeling sorry for them. But, ugh,
Well, in winter I can understand, but now, they'll get
yeah. Don't know behind that. Might need to check into that one. Yeah. So have you all been seeing any really cool birds at your feeders or anything right now?
All I know is I got a yellow one that does not even get scared by scarecrows, tears all the threads off of the clothes. And takes
Wow.
them.
Do you think that could be a goldfinch? Does he
I
have
think
black
it's
on it?
goldfinch.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They are so bright right now. And I've got a couple of nesting pairs in my yard. They have little babies in my yard all the time. And they're so bubbly sound and feisty. I like them a lot, but
Beautiful and ornery and
they're ornery, yes. I have a lot of in my pollinator garden. I have got a lot of different things that go to seed head. And I don't cut those down, and the goldfinch just attack when the flowers go to seed. And every time I open my front door to go out, there'd be like 6 goldfinches just scatter out of here. And I apologize to them every time. My new little kitten thinks this is kitty TV, and I've got Carolina wrens are being really sassy in my yard right now. The male just sings and sings and sings. I had my first gray catbird in my yard ever.
I've had a bunch.
Oh, I love them. They're one of my favorites. They just
I thought they were European.
I've had a bunch.
catbirds. I don't think they are.
I've had a bunch of the gray catbirds.
Yeah, I just love them, and they're repeating song with a meow at the end, and been kind of being woken up in the morning by between the little sassy male Carolina wren and the gray catbird are a lot of fun. They're very photogenic too. They will sit still for you, and they don't seem to be afraid of you, and they'll just sit and pose and sing while you take their picture. Yep, lots of fun. Glen Echo Ravine was one of my surprises this year. I really enjoyed it. Hadn't been before, and my husband took me down to figure out where to go and where to walk, and then I took a friend later. And there's one place we stood in the same spot for an hour and a half without moving and not realizing that much time had passed, constantly snapping pictures. It was right when you first got in, close to the creek. I could not believe the diversity and the number of warblers and the number of species I saw in a small area. I think I got 27 species standing in one place. Like I e-birded it because it was so exciting. So anyway, a lot of fun. It's winding down. Migration is almost through. A lot of stragglers are coming through, but it's just about done now. But I've been pretty exhausted, out pretty much every day doing this. But yeah. And I will not be here next week. Next Thursday, all being well, I will be in Saskatchewan, Canada, on an adventure with my husband. We're going to be wandering, and then we're going to be in Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota. And then to our property in Minnesota, I've mentioned before, planting potatoes, as we've done, it's been in our family since 1917. That my great grandfather bought it to use as a potato farm, and didn't work out very well because there was no way to get the potatoes to market. He just didn't think it through. So he was from Findlay, and they discovered in that big blast the oil well on his property and the natural gas boom in Findlay. He became a farmer that became very rich very suddenly and invested in land and various crazy schemes like a bakery and things. And he just let the land sit, didn't come back to it after taking his grandson, my grandpa, and a couple of nephews out there to plant potatoes and hunt and fish. So plant potatoes there every May. We go back every September to harvest them. So it's a lot of fun. So I'll be wandering. Probably in 2 weeks' time, I'll try to call in if I have a signal, but next week for sure, we won't have data in Canada. So anyway, anybody
Okay.
have any more questions or anything else to add this week?
I think since you will not be here next week, I think I may just, where's my picture?
Do your hummingbird one?
I think that I may just do the program that I had started to put together on unusual places
Oh,
in
yeah.
our area,
That would be interesting.
because yes, and there are a handful. Just places I've discovered that I had no idea even existed, they're interesting in terms of nature, but they're also interesting in terms of history. And you know how I feel about history.
Yeah, that's true.
And I believe history and nature go hand in hand. So
Oh, yeah.
And maybe the following week, you've got your hummingbird show. You could do that.
yes, I do have a presentation on hummingbirds. I could do. I actually have a few different things. In terms of, there are some things I had I've done for the homeschoolers that I have not done here. One was a presentation. Now, although we did herpetology a while ago, I have a presentation specifically on turtles, one specifically on frogs and toads, which there are similarities and differences. I'm not sure, did I ever do aquatic macroinvertebrates?
I don't think you did. And we talked about it.
I just did that one this last week at the one homeschool, and it's pretty interesting. At least I think so, especially since I have I have kind of a different view of it doing the stream quality monitoring that I do for ODNR. I get to see some things that you might not otherwise see. In fact, the last time I did this, I found a species that they had not trained us about that I had never even heard about.
Oh my goodness.
Which is the American water slater.
Wow.
And I found that's what it ended up being identified as through iNaturalist. And it's an insect it's a terrestrial insect, but it's one of them that starts its life as a nymph in the water, kind of like a mayfly or a stonefly or what have you, riffle beetle.
Wow.
So I could do that as well. I'm not quite sure. I'll make a decision in the next day or two here.
Good. Sorry, I can't help out much. And I don't know if I'll have connection even again for 2 weeks time, but if I do, I will call in if I'm on Wi-Fi in the hotel or a campground or wherever I happen to be, because we don't have any plans yet. So.
Yeah, that is perfectly fine.
That's great.
Okay, well, we are going to stop it there because we're at 9:23.
Mhm.
So everybody have a really good evening and a good weekend. As always, thank you for joining.
And thank you.
Yes, and we will see you all next week. I will get a notification out sooner than I did this